Okay. All right, everybody, we are here with WILX meteorologist Andy Provenzano. He's going to answer some questions for us about the weather. How are you doing today, Andy?
I'm good. Good weather.
Great, yes, it's beautiful out. So our first question is from Clarice. She wants to know why, when the weather radar shows storms coming, why do the storms separate around Lansing and go to the north in DeWitt and or to the south around Mason and Jackson?
I think there's two things going on here. First of all, I think when you want the rain and it misses, you remember that more than when the rain does come. So there's no real phenomenon that causes the storms to split apart. Now, there might be a shadowing effect of Lake Michigan. In other words, with the wind out of the southwest coming across Lake Michigan, you get all of that moisture that might go just north off the lake, where maybe Clinton County might not be involved in some of it, where the storms coming off of Indiana can stay alive because it's not going over the lake, so maybe southern sections get involved. But I think it's more of how we feel about it. When we want rain for our crops and we don't get it, we feel like it jumps over us, but we forget all the times it does rain on us. But there's no real phenomenon. There's no rivers or no mountains or anything that causes that to happen.
Okay, great. And viewer Bob Smith has a question about relative humidity, and this one's a little complicated, so let's see if I get this right. A straight percentage of how much water is in the air at the current temperature. You often state the dew point. How does dew point correlate to relative humidity, and why don't we give the relative humidity instead of the dew point to viewers?
Well, forget about relative humidity, because it's that word relative. It's relative to what the air can hold. If you have warm air, look at a warm air molecule is big, so it can hold a lot more moisture. So on a day when it's 90 degrees out and it's really humid, there's only maybe 20% relative humidity in that molecule. So that doesn't give you much. When you say the relative humidity on a really humid summer day is only 45%, you're gonna go, you're crazy. It's like 100%. Now at night, when the air starts to shrink and get colder, the molecules are really small. So now that moisture in the air starts to condense. That's how we get dew. And we end up with 80% or 90% or a foggy night, 100% humidity at night. Those relative humidity numbers go way up just because it's nighttime and we've cooled the air down. So temperatures, we always use a dew point. And if you look at this map, we have readings from today in the 80s. When we measure the dew point temperature, that is the moisture in the air. This is where we would have to cool 59 degrees for the air to be 100% full of moisture, saturated, fog. 67 in Jackson. So these higher numbers means it's more humid. Here's another way to look at it. Let's say this is a warm air molecule, this glass of water, and it's 90 degrees. It's bigger than a smaller one. We got it filled halfway up, so the relative humidity is what? 50% of what it can hold. Now, when the air gets cooler in the daytime, at nighttime, and I take 50% of that and pour it into this smaller cup, which is representing the smaller, colder air molecule. Now at night, how much full is that? 80, 90%? I could fill it to the top and still have leftover moisture. That's how you get dew or frost. So we use dew points. In other words, this is the temperature the air has to cool to be 100% saturated. Just know this. When the dew point's hitting 60 degrees, you start to know the humidity. When it gets to 65, we're all pretty muggy. When it gets 70 and above, it gets a little oppressive. And we've had some dew points in the upper 70s around here, and that is air that you can cut with a knife.
All right. And last but not least, a number of viewers noticed a pretty spectacular sunset last night. How did that happen?
We've had a lot of forest fires up in Canada. Central Canada and Western Canada has been pretty dry, as parts of our West Coast have been as well the last couple of months. And this tradition, as you know, the Rockies, we always get forest fires in our country. They do too. So there was a fairly large area that, with a couple of fires that brought in smoke on the jet stream. The jet stream's coming out of Canada the last few days right into the Great Lakes and heads off to the central parts of the East Coast. And that smoke was in the air. In fact, today you can see it on the satellite picture. It's over the Carolinas. And that smoke that's in the air, as the sun goes down, that light of the sun's coming through that smoke, and the smoke helps to diffract the light. So you get some outstanding purples and those red shades. It doesn't block it out. It's just really thin, but it makes that light change different spectrum color.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. And everybody, thanks for the hearts and the feedback. Make sure you're posting your weather questions to WILX.com and on our Facebook page. And we'll see you next week with more weather questions for Andy Provenzano.
See you then.